In the dead of night, when most of the world sleeps peacefully, Sarah Martinez stood alone behind 12 feet of razor wire and concrete barriers, her M4 rifle heavy in her hands. The ammunition depot stretched before her like a sleeping giant, containing enough firepower to level a small city. She had been assigned this duty for 3 months, watching over millions of dollars worth of military ordnance, believing she was just another face in the crowd of base security personnel. What she didn't know was that her every move, every decision, every moment of courage under pressure had been quietly observed and documented. Someone had been watching her performance from the shadows, taking notes on her dedication when others cut corners, her alertness during the loneliest hours of the night, and her unwavering integrity when faced with situations that would have broken lesser soldiers. Tonight would be different. Tonight, a knock on the guard shack door would change everything she thought she knew about her military career. On the other side stood a man whose reputation preceded him across every military base in the country, a SEAL commander whose very presence meant something extraordinary was about to unfold. But Sarah had no idea that this unexpected visit would thrust her into a world of classified operations, personal transformation, and discoveries about herself that she never imagined possible. The question wasn't why he had come. The question was whether she was ready for what came next. Sarah Martinez adjusted her tactical vest for the 100th time that evening as she walked the perimeter of the ammunition depot. The October air carried a crisp bite that cut through her uniform, but she had grown accustomed to the cold during her 3 months of guard duty at Fort Braxton. The base sprawled across thousands of acres in North Carolina, but her world had shrunk to this 8-acre compound surrounded by double-layer fencing, motion sensors, and enough surveillance cameras to make a casino owner jealous. At 24, Sarah had enlisted in the Army 2 years prior, driven by a combination of patriotic duty and a desperate need to escape the poverty that had defined her childhood in East Los Angeles. Her mother, Maria, had worked 3 jobs to keep their small apartment, often falling asleep at the kitchen table with bills scattered around her like fallen leaves. Sarah's father had disappeared when she was 12, leaving behind only empty beer bottles and a collection of broken promises. The military had offered structure, purpose, and, most importantly, a steady paycheck that allowed her to send money home every month. The ammunition depot assignment had initially felt like punishment. While other soldiers in her unit were deployed overseas or assigned to exciting training missions, Sarah found herself walking the same concrete paths night after night, checking locks on storage bunkers that held everything from small arms ammunition to artillery shells. Each bunker was numbered and color-coded, containing specific types of ordnance worth millions of dollars. Building 7 held anti-tank missiles, Building 12 contained mortar rounds, and Building 15 housed small arms ammunition that could supply an entire battalion for months. Her shift began at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m., 8 hours of solitude broken only by hourly radio check-ins with the base security office. The work was methodical and demanding. Every 30 minutes, she had to physically check each of the 12 storage buildings, testing door handles, examining locks, and scanning for any signs of unauthorized access. The electronic security system provided backup, but military protocol demanded human verification. One missed check or delayed radio call would bring a rapid response team racing across the base with sirens blazing. During her first week on the assignment, Sarah had found the isolation overwhelming. The silence of the depot at night was broken only by the distant sound of aircraft engines from the nearby airfield and the occasional rustle of small animals moving through the grass beyond the fence. She had initially passed time by listening to music through earphones, but quickly realized this compromised her ability to detect potential security threats. Instead, she developed her own mental exercises, reciting military regulations, practicing Spanish phrases her grandmother had taught her, and planning the budget for her next care package home. The other guards who rotated through the depot were a mixed group of soldiers from various units across the base. Some treated the assignment as an easy job where they could study for correspondence courses or catch up on personal letters. Others complained constantly about the boring nature of the work, counting down the days until they could return to what they considered real military duties. Sarah took a different approach entirely. She treated the ammunition depot like it was the most important assignment in the military. Every lock she checked was examined thoroughly. Every shadow that seemed out of place received her full attention. When other guards might have shortened their patrol routes or extended their break times, Sarah maintained the exact timing and procedures outlined in the security manual. She had read the entire depot security protocol 3 times, memorizing not just her own duties but understanding how her role fit into the larger security picture of the base. Her attention to detail had not gone unnoticed, though she was unaware of the observation. Staff Sergeant Williams, her immediate supervisor, had commented to his superiors about the young soldier who actually seemed to care about her assignment. Unlike the rotating cast of guards who treated depot duty as a temporary inconvenience, Sarah approached each shift with the same intensity she would bring to combat operations. The depot itself was a marvel of military engineering and security. The storage buildings were constructed of reinforced concrete with steel doors that required two separate keys to open. Each building was equipped with temperature and humidity controls to preserve the ammunition in optimal conditions. Motion sensors created an invisible web throughout the compound, while thermal cameras provided coverage even during the darkest nights. The entire facility operated under strict protocols that required multiple authorizations for any access to the stored ammunition. Sarah had learned these systems thoroughly, not because it was required, but because she believed understanding her environment made her more effective. She knew which cameras had blind spots, though she never exploited this knowledge. She understood the timing of the automated sensor sweeps and could predict when the thermal cameras would rotate to cover different sections. This knowledge made her feel more connected to her mission rather than just going through the motions. Her personal life had simplified since beginning the depot assignment. The night shift schedule meant she slept during the day, waking in the late afternoon to eat dinner and prepare for another night of guard duty. She had few friends on the base, partly due to her schedule and partly because of her intense focus on her duties. Other soldiers sometimes invited her to join them for weekend activities or evening gatherings, but Sarah usually declined, preferring to use her free time for physical training or studying military manuals. The loneliness was real, but Sarah had learned to find purpose in solitude. During her childhood, she had often been alone while her mother worked, and she had developed an ability to find comfort in her own company. The depot assignment felt familiar in some ways, requiring self-reliance and internal motivation that reminded her of those long afternoons in their empty apartment, doing homework at a wobbly kitchen table while dinner cooked in a slow cooker. Money remained a constant concern, despite the steady military paycheck. Sarah sent $400 home every month to help her mother with rent and utilities. She maintained her own expenses on the remaining portion of her salary, which meant few luxuries and careful budgeting for necessities. Her off-duty clothes were limited to a few civilian outfits purchased from the base exchange, and her entertainment budget was practically non-existent. The sacrifice felt worthwhile when she received letters from her mother describing how the extra money had allowed her to cut back to 2 jobs instead of 3. The ammunition depot represented more than just a security assignment to Sarah. It symbolized responsibility and trust that the military had placed in her hands. Every night, she protected millions of dollars worth of equipment that could be used to defend her fellow soldiers in combat situations. The thought that her vigilance might prevent ammunition from falling into the wrong hands or being damaged by security breaches gave meaning to even the most routine aspects of her duties. Her reputation for reliability had begun to spread beyond her immediate supervisors, though Sarah remained unaware of this development. Other guards mentioned her professionalism when discussing depot assignments. Security personnel from different shifts noted her thoroughness in shift change reports. The base military police had received several positive comments about her interactions during their random security checks of the depot. As Sarah completed another perimeter check on this particular October evening, she reflected on how the assignment had changed her perspective on military service. The depot had taught her that not all important military work involved dramatic action or combat situations. Sometimes the most crucial duties were the quiet ones, performed by dedicated soldiers who understood that security and readiness required constant attention to detail. The radio crackled to life as she approached the guard shack for her hourly check-in. Depot 7, this is base security, radio check. Base security, this is Depot 7, all clear, no issues to report, Sarah responded with the practiced efficiency that had become second nature over 3 months of identical exchanges. What she could not have known was that tonight would be the last time she would make that routine radio call as just another guard fulfilling a standard assignment. Changes were already in motion that would transform her understanding of her role, her capabilities, and her future in ways she could never have imagined during those long, quiet nights watching over the sleeping arsenal. The knock on the guard shack door came at precisely 0200 hours, during the quietest part of Sarah's shift. She had just completed her patrol of the eastern perimeter and was updating her logbook when 3 sharp, authoritative raps echoed through the small building. Sarah immediately stood, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm as she approached the reinforced door. Unexpected visitors during night shifts were rare and potentially dangerous situations that required careful handling according to security protocols. Through the bulletproof glass window, Sarah could see the silhouette of a tall man in military uniform. Even in the dim lighting provided by the depot's security lamps, she could make out the distinctive bearing of a senior officer. His posture was ramrod straight, and he stood with the kind of confident stillness that spoke of extensive combat experience. Sarah activated the external intercom system rather than opening the door, following proper security procedures for unscheduled visitors. "This is a restricted area. Please state your name and business," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the firm authority she had developed during her months of depot duty. "Commander Jackson, Naval Special Warfare." "I need to speak with the guard on duty," came the reply through the intercom. The voice was deep, measured, and carried an unmistakable tone of command that Sarah recognized from her interactions with high-ranking officers. Sarah's heart rate increased as she processed this information. Naval Special Warfare meant SEAL teams, and commanders in that community were legendary figures whose reputations often preceded them across military installations. However, security protocols were absolute, regardless of rank or reputation. She could not simply open the door based on a verbal identification, even for a SEAL commander. "Sir, I need to see proper identification and verify your authorization to access this facility," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional demeanor while her mind raced through the proper procedures for handling this unprecedented situation. Commander Jackson stepped closer to the window and held up his military identification card against the glass. Sarah activated the external floodlight and carefully examined the ID. The photograph matched the face before her, and she could see the distinctive gold trident insignia that marked him as a qualified SEAL operator. The identification appeared authentic, but Sarah knew that appearances could be deceiving, especially in security situations involving sensitive military installations. She picked up the secure telephone connected directly to base headquarters and dialed the number for the duty officer. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "Base security, this is Sergeant Morrison." "Sergeant Morrison, this is Martinez at Depot 7. I have an individual here claiming to be Commander Jackson from Naval Special Warfare, requesting access to speak with me. I need verification of his authorization to be in this area," Sarah reported, keeping her eyes on the figure outside the door. "Stand by, Martinez," Morrison replied. Sarah could hear keyboard clicking and muffled conversations in the background as the duty officer checked various databases and communication logs. The wait stretched for several long minutes while Commander Jackson stood patiently outside the guard shack, showing no signs of impatience or frustration at the security procedures. "Martinez, Commander Jackson is cleared for access to your location. He has proper authorization from base command. You may allow him entry," Morrison finally confirmed through the phone. Sarah replaced the phone and approached the door, still feeling uncertain about this highly unusual situation. She unlocked the multiple security mechanisms and stepped aside as Commander Jackson entered the guard shack. Up close, she could see that he was a man in his early 40s with graying hair at his temples and intense blue eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings. His uniform was immaculate, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to operating in dangerous and unpredictable environments. "Thank you for following proper security procedures, Martinez," he said, reading her name tag. "I know this is an unusual situation, and I appreciate your attention to protocol." Sarah stood at attention, unsure of the proper response to this unprecedented visit. "Sir, how can I assist you?" Commander Jackson looked around the guard shack, taking note of Sarah's meticulously organized duty station. Her logbook was filled out in precise handwriting, her equipment was properly maintained and positioned, and the entire space reflected the same attention to detail she brought to her patrol duties. He nodded slightly, as if confirming something he already suspected. "At ease, Martinez. I'm here because your performance over the past 3 months has been brought to my attention," he began, his tone becoming more conversational while retaining its authority. "Several people have commented on your approach to this assignment." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety at this statement. She had worked hard to excel at her duties, but she had no idea that anyone outside her immediate chain of command had taken notice. The fact that a SEAL commander had personally come to speak with her suggested that her performance had implications she had never considered. "I always try to do my best, sir," Sarah replied, uncertain about where this conversation was heading but determined to maintain her professionalism. "Your best has been impressive," Commander Jackson continued. "Your supervisors report that you have never missed a security check, never been late for a shift, and never filed an incomplete or inaccurate report. More importantly, you have demonstrated initiative and attention to detail that goes well beyond the minimum requirements of this position." He paused, studying Sarah's reaction to his words. She remained standing at attention, but he could see the questions forming in her eyes. "What I'm about to discuss with you is classified, and you will need to sign additional security documentation before we continue. Are you willing to proceed?" Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities of what this conversation might entail. The presence of a SEAL commander, the mention of classified information, and the unusual circumstances of this meeting suggested that her life was about to change in ways she could not predict. However, her response came without hesitation. "Yes, sir. I'm willing to proceed." Commander Jackson reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew a folded document. "This is a non-disclosure agreement that covers our conversation tonight and any future interactions related to what we discuss. Take your time reading it, and ask any questions you might have." Sarah accepted the document and read through it carefully. The language was dense with legal terminology, but the basic message was clear: she would be legally bound to maintain secrecy about information shared during this meeting and any related activities. The penalties for violation were severe, including potential court-martial and federal criminal charges. "Sir, may I ask what this is about before I sign?" Sarah inquired, wanting to understand what she was committing to while still showing respect for the commander's authority. "You may ask, and I can provide some general information," Jackson replied. "We have been observing your performance here at the depot because we are always looking for soldiers who demonstrate exceptional reliability, integrity, and attention to detail. Your 3 months of exemplary duty have indicated that you might be suitable for more challenging and sensitive assignments." The implications of his words began to sink in for Sarah. Special operations units were known for recruiting from across all branches of the military, seeking individuals who possess not just physical capabilities but also the mental toughness and moral character necessary for extremely demanding missions. The thought that she might be considered for such opportunities was both thrilling and intimidating. "What kind of assignments, sir?" she asked, though she suspected he could not provide specific details until after she signed the agreement. "The kind that require absolute trust and perfect execution under pressure," Jackson answered. "The kind that can make a real difference in protecting our national security and the safety of our fellow service members." Sarah looked down at the document in her hands, understanding that signing it would represent a turning point in her military career. Everything she had worked toward during her time at the depot had led to this moment, though she had been unaware of the scrutiny and evaluation taking place around her. The guard shack fell silent except for the humming of electronic equipment and the distant sound of wind moving through the fence surrounding the depot. Outside, the ammunition storage buildings stood like silent sentinels in the darkness, containing the firepower she had spent months protecting. Inside the small building, a decision waited that would determine whether her future would continue along its current path or venture into territory she had only imagined. Commander Jackson waited patiently, showing no signs of pressure or impatience while Sarah considered her options. His presence filled the small space with an energy that spoke of important decisions and significant consequences. Whatever he represented, whatever opportunities he might offer, Sarah sensed that this conversation would define the trajectory of her military service and possibly her entire life. The weight of the decision felt enormous, yet Sarah found herself thinking of her mother working multiple jobs, of the poverty she had left behind, and of the sense of purpose that had drawn her to military service in the first place. She had always wanted to make a difference, to contribute something meaningful to causes larger than herself. Looking up at Commander Jackson, Sarah reached for the pen he had placed on her desk and signed her name at the bottom of the non-disclosure agreement. Commander Jackson collected the signed document and placed it carefully in his uniform pocket before settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk. The atmosphere in the guard shack shifted as he transitioned from formal military protocol to something more resembling a conversation between colleagues, though the underlying authority of his position remained unmistakable. "Martinez, what I'm about to tell you will probably surprise you," he began, leaning forward slightly. "For the past 3 months, your performance here has been part of an evaluation process. Not just by your immediate supervisors, but by personnel from my unit who have been monitoring your duties." Sarah felt a mixture of shock and confusion wash over her. The idea that SEAL operators had been watching her mundane guard duties seemed almost impossible to believe. "Sir, I don't understand. What could my work here possibly have to do with special operations?" "More than you might think," Jackson replied with a slight smile. You see, the most important qualities we look for in potential candidates aren't necessarily the obvious ones. Physical fitness and tactical skills can be taught. What we cannot teach is the kind of character you've demonstrated night after night in this isolated assignment. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the ammunition depot that had become Sarah's world for the past 3 months. Every successful special operations mission depends on people who will do their job correctly even when no one is watching, even when the task seems boring or unimportant, even when they could easily cut corners without consequences. What you've done here demonstrates that kind of reliability. Sarah processed this information, trying to reconcile her perception of herself as just another soldier doing routine guard duty with the commander's description of surveillance and evaluation. "Sir, how are you monitoring my performance?" "Various methods," Jackson answered, returning to his seat. "Random spot checks during your shifts, analysis of your security reports, conversations with other guards who worked alongside you, and evaluation of your responses to the occasional irregular situations that arose during your duty periods." As he spoke, Sarah began to recall incidents over the past 3 months that had seemed routine at the time but now took on new significance. There had been the night when motion sensors detected movement near the perimeter fence that turned out to be deer, but she had followed full alert procedures until the source was identified. Another time, she had discovered a damaged lock on one of the storage buildings and had immediately reported it through proper channels rather than attempting to fix it herself. "The lock on Building 8, Sarah said suddenly, remembering the incident from 6 weeks earlier. "Exactly," Jackson confirmed. "That lock had been deliberately damaged as a test. We wanted to see how you would respond to a potential security breach. Your reaction was textbook perfect. You secured the building, reported the situation immediately, and maintained security protocols until a repair team arrived." Sarah realized that what she had considered simply doing her job correctly had actually been a series of tests designed to evaluate her suitability for something far beyond depot guard duty. The thought was both flattering and slightly unsettling, knowing that she had been under observation without her knowledge. "There were other tests," Jackson continued. "The civilian contractor who showed up claiming to need access to Building 12 for maintenance verification. You properly refused entry and required him to return during normal business hours with proper authorization. The supply truck that arrived 2 hours early for a scheduled delivery. You followed protocol and made the driver wait until the proper time window." Each example he provided brought back memories of situations where Sarah had simply followed the rules as she understood them, never suspecting that her responses were being carefully evaluated. She had always approached her duties with seriousness, but now she understood that this approach had been viewed through a much different lens than she had imagined. "Sir, what exactly are you offering me?" Sarah asked, ready to understand the purpose behind months of hidden evaluation. Commander Jackson reached into another pocket and withdrew a folder containing several documents. "I'm offering you the opportunity to volunteer for assessment and selection for a classified program that works closely with special operations units. This would involve additional training, significantly increased security clearance, and assignment to missions that I cannot describe in detail until you complete the selection process." The folder felt heavy in Sarah's hands as she accepted it, understanding that it contained information about opportunities she had never dared to imagine. Her mind immediately jumped to the practical implications of such a change. "Sir, what about my current assignment and my unit? If you choose to proceed, you would be transferred to a temporary duty status for the selection process. Your current command has already been briefed on this possibility and has given their approval for your participation. They have been very complimentary about your performance and professionalism." Sarah opened the folder and began reading the first document, which outlined a selection process that would last 8 weeks and would test candidates physically, mentally, and psychologically. The training would take place at a facility she had never heard of, and successful completion would lead to assignment within a program called Strategic Support Operations. "Strategic Support Operations?" she asked, looking up from the documents. "A unit that provides specialized support to special operations teams," Jackson explained. "SSO personnel often work in small teams or individually, providing intelligence, logistical support, and security for sensitive operations. It requires people who can work independently, make sound decisions under pressure, and maintain absolute security standards." As Sarah continued reading, she learned that SSO teams were often deployed to foreign countries, working closely with SEAL teams, Army Special Forces, and other elite units. The work involved significant risk but also provided opportunities for meaningful contribution to national security objectives. Successful SSO personnel could expect to advance rapidly through military ranks and would receive specialized training that would be valuable throughout their military careers. The salary information in the folder showed a significant increase in pay, which would allow Sarah to send more money home to her mother while also improving her own standard of living. More importantly, the description of the work aligned with her desire to make a meaningful contribution to something larger than herself. "Sir, why me?" Sarah asked. "There must be thousands of soldiers who could do this work." "There are thousands who could potentially do this work," Jackson corrected. "But there are very few who have demonstrated the specific combination of qualities we require. Your performance here has shown us that you possess integrity, attention to detail, ability to work independently, and commitment to excellence even in routine assignments. These are exactly the characteristics we need." He paused, allowing her to absorb this information. "Additionally, your background gives you certain advantages. You speak fluent Spanish, you understand how to function effectively with limited resources, and you have shown that you can maintain high performance standards even under monotonous conditions. These skills translate well to the kind of work SSO performs." Sarah thought about her childhood in East Los Angeles, the financial struggles that had shaped her perspective on life, and the determination that had driven her to excel in military service despite starting from disadvantaged circumstances. She had never considered these experiences as qualifications for special operations support, but Jackson's explanation helped her understand how her background had prepared her for challenges she had never anticipated. "What happens if I don't succeed in the selection process?" she asked, thinking about the practical implications of leaving her current assignment. "You would return to your current unit with no negative impact on your military record," Jackson assured her. "The selection process is designed to identify the right people for this work, and there is no shame in not being selected. Many excellent soldiers attempt this training without succeeding. What matters is that you have the courage to try." The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's radio crackling to life with the scheduled hourly check-in from base security. She responded with her standard all-clear report, but the routine interaction felt surreal given the extraordinary conversation taking place in her guard shack. After completing the radio call, Sarah returned her attention to Commander Jackson and the life-changing decision she was being asked to make. The documents in her hands represented a path toward opportunity she had never imagined, working with the most elite units in the military and contributing to missions of national importance. At the same time, she was acutely aware of the risks involved. Special operations work was dangerous, and even support personnel faced significant hazards. The selection process itself would be physically and mentally demanding, with no guarantee of success. Failure would mean returning to regular military duties having attempted something beyond her proven capabilities. "How long do I have to decide?" Sarah asked. "The next selection cycle begins in 2 weeks, Jackson replied. "I need your answer by tomorrow evening if you want to participate." The weight of the decision settled over Sarah as she realized that she had less than 24 hours to choose between continuing her current path and taking a leap toward something entirely unknown. Everything she had worked for, everything she had accomplished, had led to this moment of choice that would define her future in ways she was only beginning to understand. The remainder of Sarah's shift passed in a blur of conflicting thoughts and emotions. After Commander Jackson departed, leaving her with the folder of classified documents and the weight of an impossible decision, she found herself going through the motions of her security rounds while her mind raced through the implications of what she had learned. Each familiar step along the perimeter fence felt different now, knowing that her performance had been secretly evaluated for months by some of the most elite soldiers in the military. As dawn approached and her relief guard arrived for the morning shift, Sarah handed over the security log and completed her final radio check-in, wondering if this might be the last time she performed these routine duties. The normalcy of the shift change felt almost absurd given the extraordinary conversation that had taken place just hours earlier. Her replacement, Corporal Thompson, noticed her distracted demeanor but attributed it to fatigue from the long night shift. Sarah drove back to her barracks through the quiet base roads, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink that she had never really noticed during her previous morning commutes. The beauty of the moment felt significant somehow, as if she were seeing her world with new eyes that could appreciate both its familiar comforts and its limitations. In her small barracks room, Sarah spread the documents from Commander Jackson across her narrow desk and began reading them more carefully. The selection process outlined in the papers was daunting. 8 weeks of intensive training that would test every aspect of her physical fitness, mental toughness, and psychological resilience. Candidates would be evaluated on their ability to operate under extreme stress, make critical decisions with incomplete information, and maintain their effectiveness during extended periods of sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion. The failure rate for the program was sobering. According to the statistics provided, only about 30% of candidates successfully completed the selection process. Even more concerning, some candidates were eliminated not for failing specific tests but for lacking the intangible qualities necessary for special operations support work. The document emphasized that selection was as much about character and judgment as it was about meeting measurable performance standards. Sarah tried to imagine herself in the scenarios described in the training outline. Night navigation exercises through unfamiliar terrain while carrying heavy equipment. Psychological evaluations designed to test her stability under pressure. Leadership exercises where she would be required to make decisions affecting the safety and success of her teammates. The challenges seemed almost overwhelming for someone whose military experience consisted primarily of basic training and 3 months of guard duty. Yet as she read about the opportunities available to successful graduates of the program, Sarah felt a growing sense of excitement that competed with her anxiety. SSO personnel worked on missions that directly impacted national security. They traveled to locations around the world, often operating in environments where their skills and judgment could mean the difference between mission success and failure. The work required constant learning and adaptation, presenting challenges that would push her to develop capabilities she never knew she possessed. The financial benefits were significant but not the primary attraction for Sarah. While the increased pay would certainly help her family situation and improve her own standard of living, what appealed to her most was the opportunity to make a meaningful contribution to something important. The routine of depot guard duty had taught her valuable lessons about discipline and attention to detail, but it had also left her hungry for work that felt more directly connected to the larger purposes of military service. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her study of the documents. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and Sarah answered immediately, grateful for the familiar voice that could provide perspective on her current dilemma. "Mija, how are you? You sound tired," Maria Martinez observed with the intuitive awareness that mothers develop after years of listening to their children's voices. "I'm okay, Mama. Just finished a long shift," Sarah replied, settling back on her narrow military-issue bed. "How are things at home?" "Better, thanks to the money you send. I was able to cut back to just 2 jobs last month, and I'm sleeping more now." "You don't know how much that means to me," Maria said, and Sarah could hear the gratitude and relief in her voice. As they talked about family news and neighborhood gossip, Sarah found herself thinking about how her decision would affect her ability to support her mother. The increased pay from SSO work would allow her to send more money home, but the training period would involve significant uncertainty. If she failed to complete the selection process, she would return to regular military duties without any improvement in her financial situation. More importantly, the dangerous nature of special operations support work meant that Sarah would be taking risks that could potentially leave her mother without any support at all. The thought of Maria returning to 3 jobs because Sarah had been injured or killed during a mission was almost unbearable to contemplate. "Mama, can I ask you something?" Sarah said when the conversation reached a natural pause. "Of course, Mija. What is it?" "If you had a chance to do something really important, something that could make a big difference but was also very risky, would you take it?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could almost see her mother's face as she considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "That depends, Mija. What kind of risk, and what kind of difference?" Sarah struggled with how to answer without violating the security requirements of her conversation with Commander Jackson. The kind of risk that comes with trying to do more than you've done before. And the kind of difference that could help protect people. "You're talking about your military work," Maria said, demonstrating the perceptiveness that had helped her navigate years of financial and personal challenges. "Something new has come up for you." "Yes," Sarah admitted. "Something that could change everything about my career, but also something that could be very difficult and dangerous." Maria was quiet again, and Sarah could hear the sound of traffic in the background, suggesting that her mother was walking to or from one of her jobs. "Mija, when your father left us, I had to decide whether to give up or to fight for something better. It would have been easier to give up, to accept that our life was always going to be a struggle. But I chose to fight because I wanted you to have chances that I never had." She paused, and, when she continued, her voice carried the strength that had sustained their family through years of hardship. If this opportunity is real, if it's something that could let you become the person you're meant to be, then you have to try. The money you send helps, but what helps more is knowing that you're building a life that matters. After ending the call with her mother, Sarah felt a clarity that had been missing during her hours of internal debate. The fear and uncertainty remained, but they were overshadowed by a growing conviction that this opportunity represented exactly what she had been preparing for during her months of meticulous guard duty. Sarah spent the rest of the day researching what little information she could find about special operations support roles, reading military regulations about transfer procedures, and mentally preparing herself for the conversation she would need to have with Commander Jackson. By evening, she had made her decision. The phone number Jackson had provided connected directly to his secure communication system, and, when he answered, his voice carried the same calm authority she remembered from their meeting. "Commander Jackson, this is Martinez. I've made my decision about the SSO selection process." "Go ahead, Martinez." "Sir, I want to volunteer for the program. I understand the risks and the requirements, and I believe this is what I want to do with my military career." There was a brief pause before Jackson responded, and Sarah could hear what sounded like approval in his voice. "Outstanding, Martinez. Report to Building 847 tomorrow at 0800 hours for initial processing. Bring only your personal identification and the documents I provided last night. Everything else will be provided for you." "Yes, sir." "Sir, may I ask one question?" "Of course. How confident are you that I can succeed in this program?" Jackson's answer came without hesitation. "Martinez, if I weren't confident in your abilities, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The selection process will be challenging, but you've already demonstrated the most important qualities we're looking for. The rest is just a matter of pushing yourself to discover capabilities you probably don't know you have." After ending the call, Sarah sat in her small room surrounded by the possessions that had defined her military life for the past 2 years. Tomorrow, she would begin a journey towards something completely unknown, leaving behind the security and predictability of her current assignment for opportunities that both excited and terrified her. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to her mother, trying to find words that would explain her decision without revealing classified information. As she wrote, Sarah realized that she was no longer the same person who had begun guard duty at the ammunition depot 3 months earlier. The routine duties and long nights of solitude had prepared her for this moment in ways she was only beginning to understand. The young woman who had enlisted in the army to escape poverty and send money home to her family was evolving into someone capable of contributing to missions that protected national security. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of discovering just how far that evolution could take her. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood in a briefing room at a classified facility in Virginia, wearing the distinctive insignia of Strategic Support Operations on her uniform. The young woman who had spent lonely nights walking the perimeter of an ammunition depot had been transformed through 8 weeks of the most demanding training she had ever experienced, followed by specialized schooling in intelligence analysis, advanced communications, and cross-cultural operations. The selection process had tested every aspect of her character and capabilities. During the first week, candidates had been subjected to continuous physical and mental challenges designed to eliminate those who lacked the resilience necessary for special operations support work. Sarah had watched as soldiers who seemed stronger and more experienced than her were eliminated for inability to maintain performance standards under extreme stress. The psychological evaluations had been particularly challenging. Military psychologists had probed every aspect of her background, motivations, and mental stability through interviews, written tests, and scenario-based exercises. They had questioned her about her childhood poverty, her relationship with her absent father, and her ability to make life-or-death decisions under pressure. Sarah had answered every question with complete honesty, understanding that any attempt to present herself as something other than what she truly was would ultimately result in failure. Physical training had pushed her beyond limits she thought possible. Daily runs began at 5 miles and gradually increased to 15 miles over mountainous terrain while carrying 40-pound packs. Obstacle courses tested not just physical fitness but problem-solving abilities as candidates were required to overcome barriers using limited resources and creative thinking. Sleep deprivation exercises required maintaining alert performance during extended periods with only 2 or 3 hours of rest per night. The leadership exercises had surprised Sarah with their complexity and realism. She had been placed in scenarios where she was responsible for the safety and success of teammates during simulated combat operations. These exercises tested her ability to make sound decisions with incomplete information, communicate effectively under stress, and maintain team cohesion when everything seemed to be going wrong. Her experience during those long nights at the ammunition depot, learning to stay alert and maintain standards even when alone and unsupervised, had proven invaluable during these tests. By the fourth week of selection, the original group of 60 candidates had been reduced to 23. Sarah had formed close bonds with several of her fellow candidates, including Marcus Rodriguez, a former Marine infantry sergeant, and Jennifer Chan, an Air Force intelligence specialist. Together, they had supported each other through the most difficult phases of training, sharing encouragement during moments when the challenges seemed insurmountable. The academic portion of training had introduced Sarah to aspects of military operations she had never imagined. She learned to analyze intelligence reports, identifying patterns and connections that could provide vital information for operational planning. Communications training taught her to operate sophisticated radio and satellite systems that allowed coordination between special operations teams and command centers thousands of miles away. Cultural awareness classes prepared her for deployment to foreign countries where understanding local customs and languages could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Language training had built upon Sarah's native fluency in Spanish, adding conversational abilities in Arabic and Portuguese that would prove valuable during deployments to regions where SSO teams frequently operated. The intensive language instruction required her to spend hours each day in conversation with native speakers, learning not just vocabulary and grammar but the cultural nuances that would help her blend into foreign environments. Medical training had been one of the most demanding aspects of the program. All SSO personnel were required to function as combat medics, capable of providing emergency medical care to wounded team members or civilians in remote locations where traditional medical support was unavailable. Sarah had learned to perform basic surgery, treat gunshot wounds, and stabilize patients for evacuation under combat conditions. The training had been emotionally challenging as well as technically demanding, requiring her to remain calm and effective while dealing with simulated casualties that felt disturbingly realistic. The graduation ceremony for successful candidates had been a small, private affair attended only by SSO leadership and a few family members who had been granted security clearances. Sarah's mother had made the trip from Los Angeles, and her pride had been evident as she watched her daughter receive the SSO insignia from Commander Jackson. Maria Martinez had struggled with tears as she realized how far her daughter had traveled from their small apartment in East Los Angeles to this moment of professional achievement. Following graduation, Sarah had been assigned to SSO Team 7, a 5-person unit that specialized in providing support for SEAL operations in Central and South America. Her fluency in Spanish and her ability to operate effectively in resource-limited environments made her particularly valuable for missions in these regions. The team leader was Master Sergeant David Williams, a veteran of numerous deployments who had specifically requested Sarah for his team based on her performance during training. Her first deployment had taken the team to Colombia, where they provided intelligence support for a joint operation targeting drug trafficking networks that were funding terrorist organizations. Sarah's role had involved establishing communication networks in remote jungle locations, coordinating with local government forces, and analyzing intelligence gathered from various sources. The mission had lasted 3 weeks and had required her to operate for extended periods without contact with base headquarters, making decisions that affected the safety of both her team and the SEAL units they were supporting. The success of that first mission had established Sarah's reputation within the SSO community as a reliable and capable operator. Her attention to detail, which had been developed during months of ammunition depot guard duty, proved invaluable when setting up communication equipment that had to function flawlessly in challenging environmental conditions. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, demonstrated during numerous training exercises, had helped her team navigate several unexpected complications during the operation. The financial benefits of SSO service had transformed Sarah's family situation in ways she had never imagined possible. The significant increase in her military pay, combined with hazardous duty bonuses for overseas deployments, allowed her to send enough money home for her mother to quit all of her jobs and return to school to complete the nursing degree she had abandoned years earlier. Maria Martinez was now only months away from graduation and had already received job offers from several hospitals in the Los Angeles area. More importantly for Sarah, the work provided the sense of purpose and meaningful contribution that she had sought when enlisting in the military. Each mission involved challenges that required her to use every skill she had developed, from technical expertise to cultural awareness to leadership abilities. The knowledge that her performance could directly impact the safety of American military personnel and the success of operations protecting national security gave significance to even the most routine aspects of her duties.
The team dynamics within SSO-7 had become like a second family for Sarah.
The trust and interdependence required for successful special operations support had created bonds deeper than those she had experienced with any previous military unit. Each team member brought unique skills and perspectives that contributed to the team's overall effectiveness, and Sarah had discovered leadership abilities she never knew she possessed as she gradually assumed responsibility for coordinating complex communication and intelligence operations.
Commander Jackson had maintained contact with Sarah throughout her SSO service, serving as both mentor and advocate for her continued professional development.
During their most recent meeting, he had discussed opportunities for her to attend advanced training programs that could lead to assignment with even more specialized units. The conversation had reminded Sarah of that night in the guard shack when he had first explained the opportunities available to soldiers who demonstrated exceptional reliability and character. As Sarah prepared for her team's next deployment, this time to Southeast Asia where they would support operations against human trafficking networks, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from those lonely nights at the ammunition depot to her current position as a trusted member of an elite military unit. The transformation had required her to discover capabilities she had never known she possessed, but it had built upon foundations that had been established during those months of routine guard duty when no one was watching except for the evaluators she never knew were there. The young woman who had once worried about her mother working 3 jobs to pay rent was now in a position to provide financial security for her family while serving her country in ways that had direct impact on global security operations. The disciplined approach to mundane tasks that had characterized her performance at the ammunition depot had evolved into expertise in complex operations that took her to some of the most dangerous and sensitive locations in the world. Standing in the briefing room, surrounded by classified maps and intelligence reports that outlined their upcoming mission, Sarah understood that her story was still being written. Each successful operation opened doors to new opportunities and greater responsibilities within the special operations community. The path that had begun with a simple assignment to guard military ammunition had led to adventures and achievements she could never have imagined during those quiet nights walking the perimeter fence. The knock on the guard shack door that had changed everything had come exactly when she was ready for it, though she hadn't known it at the time. Commander Jackson had seen potential in her that she hadn't recognized in herself, but he had also seen the character and work ethic that had been demonstrated through months of dedication to an assignment that others had considered boring and unimportant. As her team prepared to deploy on another mission that would test every skill they had developed, Sarah realized that her greatest achievement was not the prestigious assignment or the financial security she had gained, but the discovery that ordinary dedication to duty could lead to extraordinary opportunities for service and personal growth.